Okay, guys, this is to make up some of the slides that we didn't get to before the quarterly. So, as we do with each lesson, I usually have a do now up on the board. I believe period 6 did this question. If not, then here it is. One problem that affected the Islamic Empire early on was the... Okay, now, one of these choices that should leave your attention right away would be choice 4, as a result of that group not getting to the Arabian Peninsula. The next one, choice 4, that's something that would probably stimulate the spread of the power of the Islamic Empire. So you're left with choice 2 or choice 3. Now, to make sense of this, you're going to look at that time period and you're going to think, was the Byzantine Empire a growing threat or just a threat? Okay, the Byzantine Empire was not a growing threat to the Muslim caliphates, so choice 3 is also wrong. So you're left with choice 2. And this was a huge issue throughout the years following Muhammad's death. The caliphate that follows the Umayyad would be the Abbasid, and at first they started out as Shia, which means they fervently believed that the descendant of Muhammad should be the all-time ruler, which means he has complete and full control over the not only the religious laws, but also the political and social aspects of life living under the caliphate. So you can imagine certain problems would arise if you have an empire that is being controlled by not only Muslims. Today, in today's world, in our country, we have a separation between church and state, and many people believe that your beliefs and your faith towards God, or maybe no God, shouldn't mix in your decisions for how a governing body works. But eventually this group will turn to Sunni beliefs, and that's mostly due to the fact that the politicians that gain access to giving information and advisement to the caliphs start to change their opinions. And you could read more about that in your textbook. I'm just going to move on to this section here. Again, and this was already done in certain periods, so if you have done this already, you could actually skip to whatever slide you want, as you could pause, stop, or play at will with this. Okay, so unfortunately for the Abbassid Caliphate, they get mean and dirty, and if you want to look at the hegemony of the Caliphate and the Abbasids, you're going to see that the relationship between the government and the people is not such a healthy one. I mean, for the governing rule, I mean, it works out well. You have less crime. You don't have anybody checking your power. But for the people, aka the subjects of the caliphate, they live in fear and terror each day. There's executions, public executions that can occur, and these executions were not the prettiest. They can consist of getting drawn and quartered, or even like elephants trampling you, which was a pretty crazy one that certain students had found that occurred in other Muslim empires later on. But all in all, if you were being ruled by the caliphate, whether or not you were Muslim, you still had to pay tribute. So this tribute acted as a gift or a tax to the governing body to keep it functioning, and of course they can continue spreading their faith as well as their power over different dominions of the regional world. So if you want to compare this type of rule to another point in history, you could look at the absolute monarchs of Europe in the 1700s. You could even look at certain Chinese dynasties and the emperors that lived there under the mandate of heaven. All right, as we move on, and as the caliphates spread, we're going to see, again, like I said before, they're going to rule over places that had not only Muslims. You're looking at people who are Christians, you're looking at people who are Jewish, you have the Zoroastrians. So, who do we consider people of the book? Well, that changed over time. The dhimmi at first just included the Jews and the Christians, but then it expanded to other people as well. Now, what's the difference between the Mawali and the Dhimmi? Well, the Dhimmi are people of the book. Those are people that are associated with the faith of Islam. And in your learning of history, you know how Judaism and Christianity is connected to Islam. The Mawalis, these are people who have then converted to Islam. They are not from the Arabian Peninsula. So these are converted Muslims. And now here's the appeal, okay? If you become an actual Muslim, not only do you increase in status, but you can also receive the benefits that a Muslim would enjoy. So you can get different jobs, and you gain a different respect. The unfortunate part here is that we start to see that women aren't going to be treated as Muhammad had at first wanted, and even with Jesus. This happened in both religions, both Christianity and Islam. People are made in the idea of what, or the image of what Jesus, or I'm sorry, what God looked like, or in his image. With the Muslim faith, Muhammad preached that women and men were equal in the eyes of God. So at first, women were treated with more respect. As we get farther and farther away to the origins of Islam, women then go right back to how they were treated before these faiths were created. They're second class in the social world here. So again, the idea of patriarchy is going to be reinforced or reinstated. All right, we talked about the beginnings and the ends of the caliphate for the Abbasids, but let's talk about the good things. The golden age. You want to remember that to have a golden age, most likely your people are happy, they're being fed, so they could look to other avenues of life. And this is where we start to see in any civilization, advancements in medicine, literature, travel, transportation. For the Abbasids, one of the great things they did was that they had this new boat. It's called a dhow, and it had an additional sail to it that helped it in the monsoon winds in the Indian Ocean trade network. And this was vital because depending on the particular season, trade was more difficult. So these boats allowed trade to occur more often than it had. And these dhows are also going to act as the initial driving influence to the boats that come later during the age of exploration that the Europeans will make. All right. Oh, look, here's one of the pillars of Islam known as charity. Obviously, if charity is occurring, you're going to see, giving back to the people. You're taking care of the people who are less fortunate, which is going to increase the standard of living for those people that receive your charity. So if you give money to these people, obviously the money is there so they could spend it, and it's going to stimulate the economy. So that is going to work for the Abbasids. And then, as time goes on and travel and being a merchant is prized or praised, we're going to see cities growing. And this is going to happen a lot along the Zanj coast of Africa. And you know how I am with pronouncing things. So sorry if that's wrong. It could be Zanj coast or whatever. It's on the eastern side of Africa. And I'll get better at pronouncing things, maybe. Anywho, slavery is going to be the key here. And folks, if you look back at any civilization that does a lot of these grand architectural designs, most likely slavery was involved in some form of forced labor. So in this way, unfortunately, slavery increased, fighting increased in order to achieve the these people, these bodies to work for you. Okay, art, learning, and philosophy. These are things that are going to stimulate the mind, which can lead to future advancements. If you look at the architecture of these buildings here, you're going to see remnants of these civilizations of Rome and Greece in the arches and the domes. Maybe inside these buildings, you're going to see some of the columns. What's new here is the minarets, and these are these column poles, these towers here that are going to be on the outsides of these buildings. And this is where the muezzins, almost acting as a priest for the Muslims, not necessarily a priest, but it's someone who calls the prayer. And they call to prayer in these towers. And outside of these mosques and these different architectural grand designs, we're going to also see achievements in science and math, which are what's great about this is that not only does it improve what the classical Greeks and Romans did, but they're also going to at the same time preserve it, and it's going to become the foundation to future learning. So when the western side of Europe, that Holy Roman Empire side, when that side wakes up from their dark age, they're going to be able to go to the Muslims and learn about, or relearn about a lot of the math and science that came from the classical age. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, the Abbasids, unfortunately, decline as well. And, we're going to see similar things that happen to other empires. They spread themselves too thin. They don't have enough military for defense. They're going to become vulnerable. Their politicians become corrupt. They start to move away from the true being of what a Muslim is. So, and this happened to the Umayyads as well. Now, let's talk specifically about some terminology here. The Islamic community, called the Ummah, is going to resist the formal laws of how the Abbasids were acting. So that's going to create strife and tension among the classes that exist politically in the Abbassid Caliphate. And look here, okay, like I was saying before, we're going to see self-indulgence amongst the upper elites. So the majority of the population, everybody else, is going to have a super duper problem with this, and they're going to break away, and the hegemony is definitely going to get disrupted once again. Civil unrest. If you take these words, hopefully you understand that the word civil unrest is going to relate to, the group of people living under a political faction is not happy. And here we see the exact opposite of what would have happened in a golden age. People are starving. Slavery has increased, taking away jobs from other people. Women have been brought down in status socially and politically. So women who were once able to maybe own property or receive dowries or were able to be seen in public are now more restricted to their home life. They're protected and watched by these people called eunuchs, and more on that later as we talk about the eunuchs in China. But this lifestyle for women is going to become more permanent as the years go on, and unfortunately, cruel and inhumane things are going to occur later on to them. Okay, so we're looking at the borders here. Nomadic groups along the Asian steppe are going to constantly be bombarding the outskirts of what the caliphate is, and if you don't have proper defense mechanisms, you're going to have an issue with holding your boundary. So because of the geography of this steppe, the nomadic people are more able to attack rather than if there were mountains all along there. Another group of people in the Middle East were called the Buyids, and their origin is of Persian, and their leaders are going to be called sultans. But I got to pause here because I'm going to run out of time.